Hello and welcome. You're watching Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Clarisse Fortuné. Let's start with the headlines. The GenZ uprising against police brutality in Kenya has already resulted in numerous fatalities. These protests coincide with the first anniversary of last year's demonstrations against tax hikes and follow recent rallies after the death of a Kenyan blogger while in police custody. Despite the ongoing war in Ukraine and conflicts in the Middle East, Africa continues to be identified as the world's most volatile region, according to the 2025 Global Peace Index. Our expert guest will join us to provide an in-depth analysis of the situation. And Mozambique marks a historic commemoration as it celebrates its golden anniversary, 50 years of independence from Portugal, amid deep-seated political, economic and social tensions. Several people have died and hundreds of others have been injured as thousands took to the streets across Kenya to protest against President William Ruto's government. Clashes erupted between police and demonstrators in the capital, Nairobi, as well as in other cities, marking the one-year anniversary of the deadly anti-government protests that swept the nation in 2024. Our Kenya correspondent Olivia Bizot was at the protest earlier.
Thousands of Kenyans took to the streets of Nairobi. It's the biggest turnout since June the 25th of last year, when protesters stormed Parliament over a controversial finance bill. But what began as a protest over proposed tax hikes quickly spiralled into calls for better governance, accountability and an end to police brutality. Many of the people I spoke to this Wednesday shared similar frustrations as those who took to the streets a year ago.
They promised a lot of things, still the promise, it was just empty promises. They haven't done anything. You see, now we are coming back. We don't want the promises, we want to achieve whatever we asked for last year. We will fight until we liberate this country. And if not for us, for our kids. Yes.
Look at all these young men out here. You are here to cry for what is ours. We want to take back our country. We want to own Kenya. We want to be Kenyans like the Kenya we chose to be. This is not the Kenya our forefathers fought for.
Wednesday's protests spread to cities across the country, prompting a larger police deployment to contain the unrest. By afternoon, the government announced a ban on live TV coverage, a move many broadcasters defied, calling it a violation of Kenya's constitution. Several TV stations were then pulled off the air, drawing sharp criticism from several rights groups, including Amnesty International.
And as mentioned, today marks 1 year since the deadly anti-government protests shook the nation. On June 25th last year, large demonstrations erupted in Nairobi over a finance bill that many deemed unaffordable. The situation escalated as protesters stormed Parliament, leading to police opening fire, resulting in 19 deaths and hundreds of injuries. In the aftermath, many activists were arrested and some disappeared, raising concerns that such violence is becoming the new norm. It was in what was once seen as a model democracy in East Africa. Clément Di Roma and Olivia Bizot report.
Jamil Longden and his two brothers disappeared in August 2024, about 100 meters from their home.
Let's go to the place where we were abducted.
They say they were hooded, handcuffed, and taken to an unknown location where they were held in a cell.
I was beaten for the first 2 days, and my brother was beaten frequently for the 32 days. And now the beating was just so that we say where the source of funding for the mandamanos. And we actually told them there's nobody who is funding any mandamano in Kenya. It's just Kenyans are tired of the government.
During the Mandamanos, Swahili for protests, in June and July 2024, at least 60 people were killed and dozens more were illegally detained. In June of this year, a government critic died in police custody, sparking a new wave of demonstrations which have once again turned violent.
Now here is where now 2 people were shot.
This activist says he was targeted just for attending.
I don't know if the bullet was meant for me, because on the people who were surrounding me, one was shot in his back and the other one was shot in his leg. It means we are on a very dangerous, we are walking in a very dangerous environment.
The current political climate is sparking daily conversations of concern at Amnesty International's offices. They believe it's a chilling reminder of the autocratic era under former President Moi from 1978 to 2002.
We are seeing abductions, we are seeing extrajudicial killings, we are seeing high levels of surveillance, suppression of dissent, which are all indicators of what used to happen back then.
We contacted the police for comment but received no response. Human Rights Watch warns authorities rarely prosecute officers implicated in violence against protesters, and so far, none have been sentenced.
And so it is in this context that the Global Peace Index releases its new report. It finds, unsurprisingly, that the world has become less peaceful for the 13th time in the last 17 years. And Sub-Saharan Africa stands at the epicenter of that decline. From Sudan to the Sahel, more conflicts, more militarization, and fewer resources for peace building. So what's behind this trend and what can be done to reverse it? So to help us unpack the findings, we're joined by Thomas Morgan. He's the Chief Research Officer at the Institute for Economic and Peace. Welcome, Mr. Morgan. So you measured 163 countries according to their level of peacefulness. So no surprise, we find countries like Mali, Sudan, South Sudan, and the DRC in the red. So tell us, how do you assess the level of peacefulness?
So the Global Peace Index measures peacefulness across 23 indicators across 3 domains. So the first of those looks at measures of safety and security. So things like whether citizens feel safe walking alone at night in their own countries, the homicide rate, the level of terrorism, and so on. The second domain looks at indicators of ongoing conflict. So the number of conflicts that a country is involved in, the number of deaths from violent conflict, the number of conflicts it might be involved in beyond its borders. And then the final domain looks at indicators of militarization. So things like military expenditure as a percentage of GDP, weapons imports, and weapons exports. And I think it's that third domain which lets the index capture the full spectrum of peacefulness in a country, because you may have a situation where a country is, at least on paper, has low levels of internal conflict, low levels of homicide, but it may be exporting that violence in a sense because it has high levels of weapons exports or high levels of military expenditure. So it's across those 3 domains that we measure peacefulness.
So we also have positive results. So we have some states which have high states of peace. We find Mauritius, Sierra Leone, Madagascar, Ghana.
That's correct. And in fact, Sierra Leone there is a good example of a country which has very low levels of militarization. So if you look at indicators related to weapons exports, Sierra Leone has the best possible score there, very low levels of weapons imports. And as for military expenditure as a percentage of GDP, it's less than 0.5% of GDP compared to the global average, which is over 2%.
There's one country which I found surprisingly with positive results, which is Uganda. You noted positive results in peace achievement, and yet, for example, the president just announced yesterday that he was running for 7th term amid tensions with the opposition.
That's correct. Yes. So some contradictory results in some senses across the indicators for Uganda. The 2 main drivers of the increase in peacefulness in Uganda were an increased commitment to UN peacekeeping funding. So we have an indicator that looks at the timeliness with which countries' contributions to UN peacekeeping are paid, and that improved substantially in Uganda in 2024. The other indicator that improved in Uganda was the number of deaths from internal conflict. So in 2023, there were a number of deaths associated with Islamic State and with the ADF. So there were 74 deaths recorded in 2023. That dropped down to just 4 deaths in Uganda in 2024. So even though you have increasing political tensions, political uncertainty, those were the 2 main drivers of the increase in peacefulness in Uganda.
Do you offer some kind of perspective or roadmap for those countries to boost positive peace in their country?
There are a number of ways in which a country can look to improve its levels of peacefulness. Of course, in the short term, that requires addressing ongoing conflict. So the greatest predictor of future levels of peacefulness is reducing levels of violence in the present day. There are a number of active conflicts, both state-based, intrastate, and sub-state conflicts ongoing in Africa. So addressing those first, that's the best step to ensuring peace in the short term. When it comes to long-term guarantees of peacefulness, you need to look at those factors of positive peace which help build and maintain peaceful societies. So they're things like increasing economic development, better respect for the rights of others, having a sound business environment, and also the free flow of information. So there are a number of different factors which contribute to building peaceful societies in the longer term.
So obviously global attention is now focused on crises like Ukraine and the Middle East. Should the international community recalibrate priorities to help?
Yes, so there has been a great deal of attention paid to conflicts ongoing, of course, in Ukraine and in Gaza as well, and of course in the past few days in Iran. I think that the level of attention that's paid there is appropriate, but perhaps there needs to be more attention paid to ongoing conflicts in Africa in particular. We have a piece of analysis in the report that looks at the level of media attention that's paid to conflicts of varying types in varying regions. And we find that when you look at conflicts with high levels of civilian casualties, conflicts that take place in countries with lower levels of economic development routinely receive sometimes 100 times less coverage in the media than high-profile conflicts like Ukraine, like Gaza. So I think there's definitely more attention that needs to be paid to the levels of ongoing conflict in Africa.
And I'm guessing a main element to incite countries to boost peace is the impact on economy.
Yes, that's correct. So every year we look at the total economic impact of violence to the global economy. We found that in the last year that was now approaching almost $20 trillion in PPP terms. By far the greatest contributor to the economic impact of violence is military expenditure and internal security spending. But there are a number of other things which can contribute to that economic impact of violence. So lost working days, lost productivity from homicide, just the sheer impact of conflict on a country's economy. So this is, yes, indeed, one of the main consequences of this lack of peacefulness is a fall in economic activity.
Thank you very much, Thomas Morgan, Chief Research Officer at the Institute for Economics and Peace. And someone said, let's give peace a chance. Hopefully it will happen. Now to Mozambique, commemorating 50 years of independence. Many heads of state came for the ceremony to mark its golden anniversary, which took place at the historic Macava Stadium. Emily Boyle reflects on how the country achieved its independence.
In Independence Square, this statue of Samora Machel stands proud, a strong reminder of Mozambique's difficult path from colony to sovereign state. European presence began with Vasco da Gama. The Portuguese established control of the country by 1530. Despite a wave of independence across Africa in the mid-20th century, the brutal colonial economy was thriving right into the 1960s. In June 1960, colonial soldiers fired into a crowd protesting the arrest of independence activists. What came to be called the Mueda Massacre was about to fan the flames of independent movements across the country. In 1962, exiled activists formed a new party, the Mozambique Liberation Front, also known as Frelimo. 2 years later, Frelimo launched an armed guerrilla campaign against Portuguese forces. What followed was 10 years of the Mozambican War of Independence. After a decade of sporadic fighting, and following the fall of the Portuguese dictatorship caused by the Carnation Revolution in April 1974, a ceasefire was finally agreed in September. The Lusaka Accord, signed by Samora Machel and Portuguese officials, resulted in a negotiated independence on the 25th of June 1975. The emblematic Samora Machel went on to become Mozambique's first president. The next 50 years continued to be tumultuous. Between 1977 and 1992, a violent civil war between Frelimo forces and anti-communist Renamo forces displaced millions of people and resulted in a devastating famine. Since then, occasional violence, terrorist threats and financial difficulties have continued to fuel social unrest. Mozambicans hope the next 50 years might be more prosperous for their young country.
50 years of independence for Mozambique. To conclude, Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching France 24.